Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with the vampire counts, as you can see from the Lich Master Heinrich Kemmler himself. We're going to be taking on Norska, which can potentially be a pretty tough matchup for the vampires, but let's go ahead and jump to the army compositions, and we can have a little bit of a discussion here. So of course Heinrich Kemmler going to be leading the way for my army here. What makes him particularly powerful is he's an infantry character, so he's relatively hard to goon, has a good selection of items. The Chaos Tombblade in particular is another area of effect, regeneration, which the vampires have plenty of, and if you stack them all together, they can get a lot of healing pumped out without having to dump too much Winds of Magic into things like Invocation, which I brought just in case. We've also got Dance Macabre and Raise Dead, Undeath Resurgent. The Cloak of Mist and Shadows gives Heinrich himself a Strider and a huge amount of physical resistance if in case he gets gooned. He also has, of course, the Lord of Undeath, which summons Krell, who is an absolute powerhouse. Now, honestly, Krell's probably about a 2,000 point character, maybe not quite, maybe like an 1,800 point character, but he's just about as scary as somebody like Ungrim Iron Fist, with his bonus versus large and everything now, so I like him quite a bit in a multitude of matchups. I actually think that Kemmler's going to be a pretty good choice. Whether or not he's the most competitive is debatable. There's a lot of really good vampire lords, but we're going to take him today against Norska. We've also got a Terrorgeist, Corpse Cart with an Unholy Lodestone. The rear guard is going to be 3 units of Grave Guard, with the Sternsmen, of course, in the center. Blood Knights and Varix Reavers. I find that Heavy Shock Cavalry is generally pretty good against Norska. We've also got some Skeleton Warriors, Skeleton Spears, and Zombies leading the way. For the Norscan force, it's going to be led by Wulfrik the Wanderer here. He's got a Balefiend, Lore of Shadows, so looking for some double wind action. Got Enfeebling Foe and Melkos as well. Pretty good choice. Marauders up front with some spears out to the side. 3 units of Berserkers with the Brutes of the Hound in the center. We've also got the Famir Miststalkers, Skinwolf Werekin, and the Regiment of Renowned Maws of Savagery, as well as the Beasts of Tashnar in the rear. So without further ado, let's kick the battle into full gear. We'll watch as things unfold. So yeah, first things first, there's not really too many fast attack units. The Hounds and everything are far in the back, so we're going to drop a breath attack on these Miststalkers, which didn't do as much as I'd hoped. It did maybe like 5 to 10% of their HP. Nothing amazing, but then we're going to dive the Terrorgeist just straight down onto this Famir Balefiend. You can see him coming down now to start dealing with that. Meanwhile, in the mainline engagement, we just charge straight in with the Varix Reavers and the Blood Knights, trying to collapse one of these units of Marauders very quickly. Wulfrik charged up through the center, and we summoned up some zombies to interrupt those Brutes of the Hound so that we can try and deal with these Icehorn Marauders more individually. The Sternsmen should be able to cut them up pretty well. You can see over here, these Marauders took that charge from the Blood Knights. Blood Knights are now going to be pulling away and allowing the Grave Guard, the zombies, and so on to get in there and do the work. We'll kind of soak up some cinematic action as here comes a beautiful Singing Fang from my opponent. Going to be siding straight down the line here, just mowing down tons of skeletons. Actually clips just the edge of that Norscan Spearman unit, unfortunately. But yeah, we're going to be cycle charging in and out with these Blood Knights, especially because there's the Miststalkers and this Skinwolf Werekin here in this pocket. You can see them taking quite a bit of shock damage from those Blood Knights. Meanwhile, in this center pocket here, we're going to be dropping from my opponent Penumbral Pendulum, so very nice double win there. But the Varix Reavers and the Terrorgeist and Krell has been summoned up, of course. The powerhouse himself getting in here. He's going to be dealing some heavy damage to this Famir Balefiend, while the Terrorgeist deals some damage to Wulfrik. Then maybe we'll target switch. Here come the Maws of Savagery, though, going to be getting into this pocket, doing some potentially really nice armor-piercing anti-large damage. But you can see Marauders have been routed off and are now coming back to the fight. Those Berserkers as well getting routed off. We've got this Corpse Cart just kind of sitting here, providing that regeneration aura to all the units in this pocket, especially Krell. It's very important that you keep Krell healed up and try and get him to his healing cap. You can see he was fighting those Werekin, but I'm not really sure who he's targeting now. Come on, Krell. Let's see you smack. Oh yeah, he's going to take a chunk out of these Maws of Savagery here with that anti-large armor-piercing. And yeah, meanwhile in the center pocket, Brutes of the Hound holding out pretty well. Miststalkers also doing very well. Blood Knights have picked up an XP Chevron though. Another Penumbral Pendulum coming down from my opponent, doing some pretty good damage. At this point though, the balance power is starting to turn against him. A lot of these units have been routed off. The Marauders just can't stand up to the Grave Guard and repeated cycle charges from the Varix Reavers. Likewise, these Maws of Savagery are just getting ground down by the Skeleton Spearmen, and Krell's in here smacking down their unit models as well, so Krell does enough damage. He actually gets bowled over there. But now that those guys have routed off, we're going to dispatch the Varix Reavers to make sure that they stay routed and just path through some of these other units. And then Krell's going to get through another beautiful Sea Fang from my opponent coming straight down the line here, clipping some of those Skeleton Warriors, Graveguard, and more. But yeah, at this point, Krell and the Terrorgeist are in here mashing on the Regiment of Renown Famir and the Brutes of the Hound here. I'm going to try and pull these Blood Knights back and heal them up a bit so they don't completely crumble away. You can maybe use them for 1 or 2 more charges. That Skinwolf Werekin actually gets terrified by Krell. Krell's just in here beating the crap out of him. But yeah, ooh, man, Krell getting knocked around a little bit by those Famir. But between Krell and the Terrorgeist, we should be able to deal with these Regiment of Renown Famir, who are otherwise a very strong unit. But you know, the armor-piercing anti-large of both Krell and the Terrorgeist here should be able to do enough damage. We've got Heinrich summoning up some more zombies here, so he's also in melee getting his Chaos Tombblade going. You can see he's pretty much at his healing cap at this point, as is Krell. This Terrorgeist is rapidly approaching, so you know when you get a lot of units to your healing cap as the vampires, you've got great value from your healing. The Sternsmen also getting close to their healing cap. The Varix Reavers were able to finish off those Maws of Savagery, keep them from coming back, and at this point, the rest of the Norskin forces do shatter. Wulfrik had taken a ton of damage there, the Skinwolf Werekin also fleeing the field, and at this point, just the Brutes of the Hound holding out. So we'll come in for some cinematic shots right at the end here. Beautiful Krell, man. One of my favorite unit models in the game for sure. But a super fun battle. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. Like I said, I don't know that Heinrich is necessarily the most competitive pick, but he's dirt cheap. And considering that Krell is so powerful, I think that he's going to be a pretty good pick in a multitude of matchups. We'll have to kind of see how it plays out, but I'm curious to try him in like the Chaos matchup, Tomb Kings, some of the other, maybe even Lizardmen, some of the other factions that can bring a lot of the big stompy monsters, and see how Krell stacks up in those matchups now that he's got that proper bonus versus large. The other thing that's nice about Kemmler is because he's so cheap, he allows you to go very wide with your army. You can see we had a lot of chaff here to deal with, and then also a very strong kind of rear guard with some elite units here. Varix Reavers, 104 kills, did some great work. Blood Knights, only 29, but they were mostly matched up against large elite units. They did a ton of damage to that Skinwolf Werekin and to the Miststalkers as well, so they definitely paid for themselves. Graveguard did very well, 55, 86, and only 23, but these guys are pretty much full health. Terrorgeist also picked up 2 XP chevrons, kind of mashing on some of these high-value units. Wulfrik, though, 235 from those Sea Fangs, just an absolute monster. 65 from the Balefiend Lord of Shadows as well. Skinwolf Werekin, only 20 kills. I'm honestly a little bit underwhelmed by the Skinwolf Werekin. He has a similar problem to Gorbel in that he gets knocked around pretty easily. He's not the tankiest character. I mean, he does have the regeneration, but we'll look at him actually in the custom battle screen in just a moment, as well as the Maws of Savagery and so on. But yeah, Famir Miststalker is doing very well as usual. Brutes of the Hound, 287 kills in that center pocket, just cleaning up skeletons and zombies left and right. Unfortunately, they weren't able to cut through enough to get to the Graveguard in time. That's kind of the idea here, is we can wear them down with quite a bit of attrition. 44 kills on Skeleton Warriors isn't bad at all, especially, but just wear them down so much that by the time they get to the Graveguard, they're tired, they're beat up, and yeah, the Graveguard can kind of just clean up shop at the end there. But very well played to my opponent. In terms of the Norskin vampire matchup, there's a few different ways that you can go with Norska. Like I said, I'm not super enamored with Skinwolves right now. I think they're maybe a little bit undertuned. I hesitate to say that because they were so powerful in Game 1. I don't mind them being a little bit undertuned for a while, but let's see here. So if we take a look at Norska, first thing I would recommend is against the vampires, you probably want to go with a Fire Balefiend rather than Shadows, just because Flaming Sword of Ruin will net you a ton of value, especially fighting things like Terrorgeist, the Varix Reavers, Sternsmen, anything that has that standard regeneration trait, which a lot of vampire units have. A lot of units you're especially going to see in this matchup. Very useful to have that Flaming Sword of Ruin. Burning Head is really good as well. You can basically use it more or less like he did with the Penumbral Pendulum here, and use it to clear out frontline chaff. I typically run with this loadout. Cascading Fire Cloak is a pretty decent buff as well to a Lord or Hero. You can bring Wulfrik for the Sea Fang, definitely pretty good in this matchup. I would probably recommend, I mean, putting him up on the Mammoth does make him relatively expensive and a pretty good sized target as well, but he can also dish out a lot more damage, and he has a huge amount of HP, so just something to consider there. I do like the pick of the Brutes of the Hound. A couple of Marauder Berserkers can be good. You definitely want the Famir Miststalkers. Now the Werekin, let's have a look at his stats here. I mean, if you take a look at his combat stats alone, 45 attack and 32 defense really isn't that great for a hero. I mean, I guess if you compare it to like a generic Chaos Caster or something, but against a lot of the legendary characters, he's going to really struggle. He only has 70 armor, which is kind of middling. I mean, it's a pretty decent amount, but for a character like this, he can potentially take a lot of damage. I mean, don't get me wrong, these guys are still very strong in the right situation. Pretty strong armor piercing with a 36 bonus versus large, which is pretty considerable. He also comes with a few nice support buffs, but he's also pretty expensive as well, coming in at about 1,400 points, even stripped down 1,200 base. So a pretty expensive character overall, and yeah, they do have the similar problem to Gorbel, like I said before, getting knocked around quite a bit, so not too enamored with them. Likewise for the Maws of Savagery here, they're pretty decent, but again, just the combat stats here are not that good. Even the combat stats of basic Skinwolves and armored Skinwolves, 32 and 28 is pretty poor. It's really not that great in terms of combat stats. The Famir actually have better combat stats all around. So that's one of the reasons why I like Famir more right now than the Skinwolves, because they seem to have better combat stats overall. The Skinwolf Werekin in particular is pretty expensive. I mean, he can definitely pay himself off, but you have to get him on the right target at the right time. Can be tricky, especially with a mass infantry build like the one I brought, with only a few high-value large targets. But anyway, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Something like this can be pretty fun. The Chaos War Shrine is also pretty good because it gives you this ability which not only makes your unit unbreakable, but also gives fire damage for a short amount of time. So it can synergize quite well with a Famir Balefiend Lore of Fire. But like I said, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, all that jazz. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.